Before we begin, 3 messages. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. Here's a riddle. How do you build native cross-platform mobile applications quickly without having to rewrite code and hire consultants at a huge cost? Titanium from Appcelerator. Called the easy button for mobile application development, it allows you to focus more on what's important, getting product out the door. Join the more than 1.5 million active developers who have created over 13,000 apps at www.appcelerator.com. So, you've taken some of the advice that has come from Untether.tv guests, built an app, and now you're turning your attention to generating some hard-earned revenue. Then you should be looking at Pontiflex App Leads. Some of your peers who are using App Leads are earning CPMs 100 times the industry average. And if you need any other reasons to start, I'll give you 2 more. You can run sign-up ads from top brands, the ones that you recognize, and it won't take your precious users out of your app. Go to appleads.com, that's appleads.com to sign up. Hello everybody, welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host, Rob Woodbridge. This is where we get passionate and deep around the mobile industry with some of the most prominent rock stars in this space, the guys who are changing the very ground we're moving on as we're walking on it in this industry. And, I've got somebody from New York City, Olof Schybergson, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Fjord. Originally based out of London in the UK, he's over in New York City. They're across pretty much all of EMEA and have been around for 10 years. And we're going to talk today, for the brunt of this conversation, around strategy, around that terrible word that everybody kind of runs away from, which is mobile strategy, the need, the essence of it, what works, some of the lessons that we've all learned in this space, and so maybe some hints and some tips as to where you should look for and, for help or even what you should be, what your first step might be. So we're hopefully going to extract a little bit of that from Olaf and hear a little bit about what he's doing at Fjord. Fjord is a service design consultancy, and we're going to get into what that means as well. So Olaf, thank you so much for coming on to Untether.tv, sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, you're in New York. We're going to talk as well a little bit about the difference between mobile and EMEA and mobile strategy in EMEA and kind of the US. Even maybe dive a little bit into the difference between New York, US and Silicon Valley or West Coast, right. US. But first, service design consultancy. What is Fjord? So
I'm glad you asked that actually. So we're a purely digital company. So all we do is around digital. And we talk about service design because for us the action in terms of design and what you need to shape and what is important to perfect has moved from essentially hardware and things to services. And as you know, as most of the people viewing this know, especially the developing world, most people in the economy work in the service industry. Yes. Not in manufacturing and so on, and service design is a relatively new and not very much talked about aspect of design, and it is purely about looking at how can you craft and shape the best possible services in the world. And the word design that we use to describe our company, it's quite a holistic version of design. So design for some people mean shape and object. For most people it probably means that's the kind of heritage of the word. But when you apply it to services, it's quite interesting because then it becomes much wider and much less tangible. So how do you design a service? Because service touch points, service experiences aren't just things that you see, but there are also lots of other things that you experience. It might be a phone call with a customer service representative. It might be that handover from reading your book on your Kindle device to reading it on your iPhone or whatever other device you might be using. And that seamless or nice transition is definitely part of the experience, but at best it's actually invisible. So service design is a combination of strategic thinking, great concepting to get the breakthrough solutions, and then designing the total experience. So designing the visual part, but also the non-visual part, the behavior of the service.
So I mean, good service design is that you don't notice it. Is that a good way of, it's like WhisperNet, as you said in the Kindle, where I pick up any device and I'm on the same page that I left on, regardless. That's a service design, but you don't notice it because you expect it. Is that where you play?
That's definitely one core area. It's underappreciated, but it's very, very important. Sure. But not all services need that. So it really depends on the service. So in the Kindle example, all that invisible stuff just brings about the sense of magic. So I might order my Kindle online on my computer, and then when it arrives at home, then it already has my name on the screen. So it already feels personalized. It feels like it's crafted around me, rather than this sort of dumb piece of hardware that's uniform for all the millions of people. So it already feels a bit more like it's mine. And like you said, when I pick it up in on different screens, it just automatically scrolls to where I left it off. And that type of behind the scenes technical widgetry and magic is certainly part of good service design, but it's definitely not the only one. It depends on the type of service you're developing.
Okay, so last question about what you guys are doing here, because it's really interesting when it comes to servicing clients, right? And that means so many different things, as you said, to so many different people in so many different industries. But are you seeing a common trend in this? Are people paying more attention today than they were 10 years ago when you started the firm? Or is it are they spending more time on this?
Yeah. So in Europe, the term service design is definitely starting to be quite established. Mm-hmm. In the US, some people who are quite deep within service delivery and creation, they talk about service design, but it's not quite established yet as a mainstream term. But it will be. It will probably be within the next year or two. There's a massive difference in terms of interest between 10 years ago and now. So if you can kind of imagine 10 years ago, it was just after the dot-com crash, and it was just before 9/11. So imagine setting up a new company focused on innovation, digital, mobile, what we called communities back then. Now we call it social media.
Yep.
So that were all the things we wanted to focus on. And then, as a backdrop, you have the total disinterest in technology and digital. And on top of that, you have this massive preoccupation with 9/11 and terrorism and so on. So quite a difficult business setting to set up Fjord. And what we set up Fjord to do was to focus on service design and service innovation and creating wonderful experiences that people love and integrate into their lives. But back then, there was very, very little interest for it. It was a bit like trying to sell web design in the early 90s, where companies go like, well, what's the return on investment for a web experience? And why do I need it? And so on. A few years later, everyone was interested.
Yep.
So it's a nice analogy in a way, because that's exactly what's happened to us. So now, 10 years later, all those things that we have done for 10 years, service design, mobile, cross-platform, social media, etc. All of that is hugely sought after. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of demand, and we have the opportunity to work with great clients and grow at a healthy rate. But it's a much more pleasant environment to be in now, 10 years later, compared to 10 years ago.
I absolutely can see that. Certainly, walking into a firestorm when you start the company has, aside from the fact that it's become a little bit more, top of mind when it comes to service, has there been any, and aside from the technology, because it's been a massive shift in technology, is there anything else that's driving this, or is it just that companies are realizing that the customers that they have are the best customers on the planet, and focus on keeping those customers happy, and then finding new customers after that. Is that the process, or is there something else that's driving this?
Well, you touched on two things that are really important in terms of what's driving it. And within the things you already mentioned, the very rapid move and shift to mobile first is definitely something that's driving uptake and interest in our services. I would add to your list of things one other meta trend, which is that especially in mobile and telecom, there has been a massive shift, and it's a two-part shift. And the first part of it is that the mobile carriers used to be in control, and they used to essentially curate the experience for end users. So they chose the applications that went on there. They had walled gardens, and there was no kind of standard internet experience, or very little of that in the mobile devices that people used. And that has dramatically shifted. So now the experience is actually curated by the end user themselves. So they choose which applications they want out of hundreds of thousands, and they download them and install them. And therefore, the end user is a much bigger part of defining the experience. And this is a dramatic shift. So the business has moved from essentially B to B to C, as in handset manufacturers sell to carriers who sell to end users, to B to C.
Direct.
So it has become much more direct to the end user and the consumer. And much of that, of course, we can thank Apple for, because they have really disrupted that traditional model. And I think it's a really good and positive disruption. And the second thing that's happened alongside, and probably partly as a consequence of that, is that the companies who focus on designing great end-user experiences, whether it's applications or mobile operating systems or cross-platform services, whatever it is, those are the customers that increasingly become highly valued, highly respected, and gain great momentum. So what that means for a company like Fjord, which is design-led, is that increasingly companies are coming to us to ask us to solve their strategic problems and help them set the course for their digital or mobile strategy, which is a really wonderful place to be in, because traditionally they would probably have gone to either a technology consultancy that comes at it from a technology perspective, or to a business consultancy that leads with spreadsheets and numbers.
That's right.
And increasingly they're recognizing that the end user experience and the design of the experience is really totally critical and central. So they come to Fjord and companies like Fjord to solve their problems.
So it's mobile first, UI, or design first. It's those kind of combination of those two that they're coming at you with right now, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned the early days of the web. Maybe 93, 94, at that point in time, where people were coming. It was pushing a boulder up a hill trying to convince somebody to get a website. And a few short years later, everybody was clamoring to get a website, right? And I know that you were involved with Razorfish. Is that right? Back in those days?
Yeah.
So did you? So you were right in the middle of it, and you saw this kind of overnight switch, where it was you were pulling and pulling clients, and then all of a sudden Netscape became the browser of choice. They went IPO. Everybody was on the internet, and then everybody needed a website. Are you seeing similarities with that over the last 10 years in the mobile space, where it was kind of, why would I need that? What's the ROI? And do you see a point where are we switching, or do you see a point where we're switching into that point where people will just automatically think mobile first?
It is definitely happening. It's a good comparison to make, because there's a lot of similarities. So so one of the problems when things became really popular back in the late 90s in terms of web design was that people didn't really care about validating the ideas with end users and designing around real user needs. It was this kind of mad era where companies like Razorfish, where I worked, we got these wonderful briefs that were very open. it was briefs like, we need to be on the web, come up with a great idea for us, and then we'll pile in millions and make that happen. And you design it for us and implement it and so on. So great briefs, yeah. But also a huge rush in terms of getting stuff to market. So so companies had very aggressive timelines, and it meant that, you know, often they launched bad ideas that didn't really meet end user needs. And of course, there's iconic examples of that, like boo.com and so on.
Pets.com and yes, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things that I felt was quite tough towards the end of Raise a Fish, was that I didn't feel that we were really meeting true business needs and end user needs. And right now, I think we're in a slightly dangerous place in mobile as well, where companies now say, yes, we have to go mobile. We have to move very rapidly, very, very quickly. So let's get into the race and let's get something great to market very fast. Yeah. And it's got to be an app. So everyone thinks, I need an app for this. So you then have these large and small organizations where everyone in the company wants their own app. So then you end up spending a lot of money rushing to produce apps and putting them on a marketplace. Then, you know, a few months later, you wonder why didn't we get more traction with this app, and why didn't people download it, and why doesn't it add to our bottom line, and so on. So there's a crazy gold rush, yes, in mobile app creation, and you know, the insightful clients and companies that we're working with, they might be involved in app creation and so on, but at the same time they're taking a deep breath and saying, actually, let's think about this for a minute. Let's take one step back and look at the overall landscape. Look at what the general trends are, what is it that consumers are actually demanding and wanting, and so on. And let's develop a strategy that's not just an app strategy for the next few months, but it's maybe a 2 to 3 year mobile plan that includes lots of different initiatives and overlaps with our other marketing roadmaps and our web or other digital channel roadmaps, etc. So it becomes complementary and there's strong synergies, rather than these very siloed and fragmented mobile apps thrown out there only.
So, I mean, so appropriate, this conversation, because when you start to think about that app rush, it was like the web rush.
Yes.
You know, and that's where the similarities, I believe, you know, the technology might be the same underlying technology, but mobile first versus web first is a drastically different strategy. They have to complement each other. But it is that when you launch the app, it's like the high of launching the app, and then it's the trough of disillusionment when the app doesn't do anything to your bottom line and you think it's a failure. And that's just a failure to execute on an effective strategy. You know, you didn't hit the mark with that product then, obviously, towards what your business needed. And that's really where you come into the, you know, when it comes to service design, is how to fill out the holes, or maybe is it how to fill out the holes in all your other strategy by bringing mobile in? Is that a good approach? How should companies be approaching mobile, you know, when they're looking to kind of move their company into the mobile space?
So it's a great question, and it's quite a tricky one to answer, because there isn't. It's quite tricky to say that's the type of agency or type of consultancy that I can take and have solve all my problems in mobile. So so companies that can really solve the fundamental challenge of creating a strong mobile strategy are few and far between. Mm-hmm. I think in the North American market, very few agencies or consultancies have been involved in mobile for a long period of time.
Yeah, so 6 months or so is what I've seen.
Sorry?
You know, the majority of them have you know, basically tagged it on over the last 6 months and said, oh, and mobile.
Yes, right? Yeah, exactly. And therefore, you know, there might be practitioners and so on, but they have no experience. They haven't gone through the pain of, you know, going through a creation process, launching something, and then realizing it's wrong, trying to update and improve it, and so on. So there's just a lack of experience. There's also the fact that the mobile ecosystem, the mobile landscape, or that industry is actually relatively complex compared to, for example, internet.
Yes.
So you need to work with people who understand the dynamics and understand what the different options, opportunities, ecosystems within mobile are, and how money moves within that, and what end users and consumers, what they appreciate, what they want today, what they want tomorrow, etc. So one of the challenges in answering your question is that there aren't that many companies or individuals who have that depth of expertise that's needed to answer those tricky and challenging questions. But picking up on something that you said just a minute ago, you talked about the mobile strategy being complementary to the web or other digital strategies, and I think that's exactly the right way of thinking. So a lot of people think of mobile first, or the mobile opportunity as another channel, and it's sort of, let's take our web experience and shrink it down and publish it as an app. So it's duplication or total silo development. And that's not going to deliver the best long-term results for your business. And a more synergistic and overlapping strategy is more likely to produce great results. So, take something like NFL, American football. So people watch the game on TV. But is there an experience on an iPad or a mobile phone that might be a great companion experience, where you can dig into statistics and learn about people and the players and so on? Maybe also use that same experience to prepare for the game and then find out statistics afterwards and so on. I would have thought so, because all of that information is not going to be on your TV screen and overlaying it. So just a very simple and easy example of a companion experience rather than a total duplication experience. And if you look at things like, say, Netflix, or we mentioned Kindle, the Kindle experience before, in e-reading and so on, that sort of taking an experience and moving it between screens and moving it between locations is definitely the future of mobility. And when you look at it from a user perspective, you start to see things very clearly and in a different light. So instead of seeing it as a silo, which is how you might see mobile if you just think about your organization, but if you think about it from a user perspective, you realize that during an ordinary day, there might be 7, 8, 10 different points in time where you can touch your customer, the end user, with digital experiences, but they might use several different types of screens during those 7, 8 touch points. And sometimes they use several. So in the morning, they might have the phone for the alarm clock. Then they might use an iPad over the breakfast table or TV in the background. Then they use maybe either a sat nav or a mobile to navigate to where they're going to. Then there's computers, maybe tablets, then the phone again during lunch, etc. And when you look at it from the user perspective like that, then immediately you realize that to be relevant and to win when you try and capture mind share, you need to have a solution that seamlessly, fluidly moves between screens, rather than an experience that only works on one screen, or an experience that purely duplicates, because the same experience is not always appropriate on every single screen. Try and take your website and put it on the TV, and you have a mess.
Exactly. Have you seen a great example of companies that are doing this properly, that are complementing what they're doing right now, so that they're maximizing? This sounds so wrong, but I'll say it anyways, that are maximizing the touch points with a customer. I've seen a lot of companies that are building apps that, are a once a month use, which you might as well not do that. There's probably another way to communicate with your end user more so than once a month. But are you seeing companies that are doing that they are touching their customer 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day?
Yeah. So I mean, probably the most quoted example is Apple, and if you look at the latest announcements, yes, that they made around iCloud and iTunes in the sky and so on, that is actually about exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So Apple traditionally has created fantastic hardware, and that's still how they capture value. So
Yeah.
Apple make money by selling these expensive devices that have huge amounts of margin, and all the services that they have are essentially supporting that primary strategy. And the latest announcements are largely about service. Apple will still continue to capture value in the device itself, but by creating these seamless experiences that allow people who are in the Apple religion, so to speak, who are devoted Apple fans and have several Apple devices, allowing them to have seamless experiences across points in time and across devices, has become so critical that Apple has to invest huge amounts of money in a cloud experience that enables that. We mentioned Amazon and the Kindle before. That's a good example. A couple of examples of things that at Fjord we've been involved in. So BBC in the UK, they have a service called iPlayer. And the way that you can think of that is like a Hulu or a Netflix, but only BBC content. So BBC have something like 10 TV channels and 10 radio channels, and are known for very high quality content. And we worked with the BBC to create the iPlayer service, actually starting back in 2006. And it has become hugely popular and totally dominant in the UK market. So they serve something like 180 million programs every month, most of them TV programs. So it's very high volume. And they exist on 4 different platforms. So you can experience BBC iPlayer through your mobile phone, you can experience it through the web, you can experience it through the TV, and finally through gaming consoles. So they're on 4 different platforms and lots of different platforms within the platforms, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So it's a very ambitious cross-platform experience, and they've done extremely well as a result. People might not always use all 4 or even 2, but the safety of the knowledge that I can get my lovely BBC experience on any platform that I choose, that in itself makes it much easier to engage and lean in and become a loyal user. And another example is for a bank that we're working with a lot. So one of the most progressive banks based out of Europe is called BBVA. In the US, they have a bank called BBVA Compass. And with them, we worked on lots of different experiences, tablet experiences, mobile experiences, web experiences, and retail experiences. So digital used at in the branches, in the bank branches. So they are very far ahead in the financial sector, thinking about seamless cross-platform experiences where they serve their users across many different touch points.
And different users will use it for different purposes, obviously. And I think that's those are 2 great strategies. One is multi-channel, being across, allowing your content to be viewed or consumed on everything on every device, much like the Kindle.
Yeah.
And the other one is very much a strategy that says, okay, so the bank manager or the branch manager or the teller in a bank would use it for this reason, the consumer would use it for this reason, and allowing, building that application or building those applications for somebody a different type of consumer to consume it. So I think those are 2 great examples. What about tips, things to avoid when building out your strategy? Are there maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things that you think that, listen, whatever you do, either do this, or whatever you do, don't do this when you're working on your strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's several things going on that probably isn't going to be so successful longer term. And one of them is that a lot of large companies, they already have a digital agency of record or an agency of record that comes from a marketing and advertising perspective. And they say to themselves, who's gonna help us create the great mobile strategy? Well, of course, our agency of record. They go to the agency of record and ask them, do you have mobile expertise? Of course, the agency nods and says, yes, we have lots of expertise and we can solve all your problems. So they take the brief and then they create a strategy. But the strategy is already biased on day one. It's biased towards advertising and marketing thinking, which might be suitable for the marketing and advertising part of the mobile strategy. But at worst, it's actually based on old school marketing principles, which is an industrial type of mindset where you create and protect a brand centrally, and then you push out branded messages through very controlled channels. So it's kind of centrally created and then uniformly distributed, which is the industrial mindset. My view is that today's mindset should be crafted around the end user. And now that we're in the service economy, where we use software, we can do that. So I can create these magical service experiences around individual users. So Rob, if you want me to serve you a fantastic experience, I can make it feel like it's yours. I don't have to do the old school type of creation where I create it centrally and then I push it out to everyone in the same way. Unfortunately, a lot of marketeers still think about things the wrong way around, and they default to doing campaigns. So then the mobile strategy will be kind of industrial in its mindset, and it will be centered around campaigns. Now, I believe that for advertising and marketing to be effective in mobile, it has to be much more integrated with the service experience itself. And you look at how you make money from mobile. Increasingly, you don't pay for applications. You might pay for upgrading to the next level of the service or getting access to new content and so on within an application, for example. So in-app purchases. So it becomes much more about marketing and upselling and so on within the experience itself, rather than these isolated campaigns on their own. Excuse me. So that's basically a common mistake, is that you expect your marketing advertising agency to solve your mobile strategy, and they are biased to their way of thinking. So I would definitely avoid clients. I would advise clients to avoid giving it without a great deal of thought to their existing agency of record. Another thing that happens quite a lot is that you go to your technology company. So it might be the CIO of a company that goes to their trusted technology partner and says, hey, come up with a technology strategy for mobile. And then you get the kind of old school technology roadmap and technology strategy, which probably technically is very sound, but it probably ignores some key business dynamics, and crucially, it will ignore the end user trends and the very rapid shifts in terms of consumer expectation and so on. So you need to think carefully about who do you either employ internally that has the expertise and knowledge that spans technology, business, and the consumer world, or what type of agency, what type of consultancy exists out there that you can turn to who can balance those things, because you don't want your strategy to be totally biased to one of those perspectives.
I mean, I don't think that, I think we're kindred spirits when it comes to this exact topic, but a lot of companies lead with technology, don't they? You know, so if they don't have an agency of record, they'll look out and they'll say, we need to offer coupons. Right?
Yes.
Which is the beginning of the end. It's kind of a slow death when you start offering coupons.
Right.
So a lot of companies did that. They jumped in. This was their mobile strategy. So some of them went this way. I'm going to build an app.
Yes.
Right. Some of them went the more moderate way, which is we're just going to make our mobile website. Our website. We're going to mobilize that. We're going to add the WordPress theme that allows it to be mobile. And now we're mobile. And then there are that other group that just dive in and say, listen, we need to jump on the coupon sites. We need to leverage Foursquare or the location-based services, and we're just going to do that without thinking about the ramifications long term of what their choice is. Those are all strategies, I would say,
yes.
to varying degrees. How did and some of them are measurable, some of them aren't. But how do you look at something objectively and say, listen, you know what? I know that you're demanding an ROI. I know that you want to know what the ROI of mobile is for you guys. So how do you deal with that when you're building out the strategy? Because sometimes there isn't one right away, but 6 months down the road, they look at you and say, Olaf, thank you guys for forcing this issue on us and helping us, see the way, because that ROI is there. How do you convince, or how do you convince is a terrible word, but how do you push that out to your clients that say, listen, you really should be thinking about this, and you should be thinking about it in a strategic way, not just a gut check way?
Yeah. So that's a deep question.
I know. We've only got like 7 seconds left. So if you could summarize it,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So no, but it's a great question. I think the question about ROI is really interesting, and it's a tricky one because the mobile space, the digital space, is moving so fast that the business model that worked yesterday is not working today.
Right.
So I'll give you an example.
And you mean literally? Like you mean that literally? Like yesterday, literally. It's different today. Yes, it's not not figuratively. Yeah. Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Yes. So I'll give you a very pointed example of why that's the case. In this world where consumers curate their own experiences by choosing the applications that they install on their mobile devices, in that space, it's very difficult for companies large companies who might have created applications to even be found. Right. So a massive barrier is just discovery, because there's hundreds of thousands of apps out there. How are you going to find your route into the customer's home screen on their device? And that's a massive problem. In the past, they used to be able to buy their way in there. They make a deal with a mobile carrier, spend a lot of money with them, and the mobile carrier puts them in a prominent position. Now they can't do it anymore. So what rises to the top in mobile is the stuff that's most popular. So the things that people buy and people talk about and so on. Right. Sometimes some of the smallest companies are creating the most popular mobile experiences and are making the most money on it. And that's a dramatic shift. Okay, so what's the solution to that? The solution to that yesterday used to be something called Tapjoy. Yep. So Tapjoy is a great mobile marketing company. They have a lot of successful solutions. One of them is a solution that allows you to buy fame in the app world. So what you do is, say you have an iPhone app, you go to Tapjoy, you spend between $50,000 and $100,000, and what they do is that they ensure success for your app. And the way that they do that is that they have partnership deals with lots of typically games, mobile games companies, and when you get to a point in one of those games where you should buy some virtual goods or buy your way up to the next level of the game, instead of spending real money, you can simply go and download an application that Tapjoy tells you to download and open it once. Right. So then what happens is that you have millions of people around the globe downloading applications and opening them once, and that artificially pushes the popularity of that up in the App Store. Great idea. It basically games the algorithms in the App Store, and it artificially pushes up an application into most popular. And then if it's any good, it probably stays up there. So super great idea. Apple found out and shut it down. Yeah. So now you can't do it anymore. Yep. So now it's very difficult to buy fame in the App Store the way that you could yesterday. Nope. So that's a very pointed example of how the world is changing in mobile very, very quickly. So therefore, I think what you can do is you can look at broad trends and you can look at things like what are the dominant ecosystems in mobile, what are the dominant platforms, and what are consumers, our customers, what are they prepared to pay for? What's valuable to them? So you can look at broad things like that and make some educated guesses, and then create a high-level business plan around that might be for the next year or 2 years. But it would probably be foolish to create business plans that are 5 years out, because the world is changing so fast. And it's definitely foolish to create detailed business plans based on very, very specific things, a very specific technology, a very specific feature, and so on. So definitely encourage our clients to not go through the hassle of doing detailed business projections and plans based on that, but rather to look at the bigger picture, look at the large dynamics, and then create high-level business plans so that they make some educated guesses about the likely ROI on the solutions in the future.
So that's really interesting. And so what you're basically saying is that have a framework. I mean, here, I hate using these terms, but have a long-term vision. I mean, maybe 1 and 2 years, maybe that's a little bit far, but as a company, you have to be driving towards something. So have a longer-term, higher-level vision, and then and a framework, and then as you're going through, heading towards that, certain technologies or certain ways of doing things or certain innovations will start to come into your view that you should be capitalizing on at that moment. But at least it gives you that view. So you're not kind of looking left and right, attention deficit disorder, which, shiny new object in mobile is what we're seeing right now. But so having a clear vision, it might shift, but as you're shifting, things come into view and things leave your viewpoint. And then you should jump onto those opportunities that fit where you're heading. Is that a good way to summarize that? That's
a great way of summarizing. So if you don't mind, I'll give one more example.
Absolutely.
Based on mentioned. So you mentioned coupons.
Yeah.
And so it's quite easy to be quite reactive in mobile. So you look at Groupon, you look at initiatives like that, and you're like, oh, we need to do couponing. I'm going to jump on that bandwagon, and I'm going to be very successful. I'm going to make a lot of money. Now, a lot of companies are doing that. So suddenly you have lots of competing companies who are all in the couponing business, and lots of stuff is being pushed at the end users. And for end users, it's starting to feel like spam. So I have all these incoming things, and sometimes I might act on them, sometimes not. But it definitely isn't guaranteed to be a pleasurable experience.
Right.
And therefore, jumping into that couponing game might not be the best strategy. Then you look at a more technology-led solution, NFC. And NFC, people think that's the future of payments. So let's jump on that bandwagon. Let's create an app, or let's create a solution that allows NFC to be used as the way to pay for goods. Again, completely logical and clear and good idea in a way, but it's ignoring the fact that end users already have two very good, very well established universal ways of paying: cash and credit cards.
Absolutely.
And both of those are typically easier and more convenient than figuring out what app you use in which places to do an NFC-based transaction on a mobile phone. Okay, so here you have two in isolation quite nice and good ideas, but on their own, one is going to feel to the end user like spam. The second one will feel like hassle and not a better alternative than what you have already: credit cards and cash. However, if you start to put those together, so you take NFC for payment, you take couponing, you maybe take loyalty cards, and you take things like scanning barcodes in a retail store and get alternative prices online and in stores nearby and so on. You take all of those things together, you put it together and you say, this starts to sound like actually we're improving shopping overall. And I think that it's much more likely that people's behavior will change once there's something that's totally and clearly better than what they had yesterday.
Right.
Coupon spams digitally isn't necessarily much better than the coupons in my newspaper.
Or in your mailbox. Yep.
Yeah, right, that's right. And NFC payment in the retail store isn't better on its own than a credit card and cash necessarily for the end user. But if you can integrate them into an experience that essentially allows me to leave my wallet and leave the computation required to figure out which loyalty card to use for what and when, leave all of that behind, integrate all of that in your mobile phone, it starts to sound like you have a really compelling package that has a great opportunity to disrupt and change behavior. And that type of thinking, realizing, putting things together into coherent buckets is what's needed in a mobile strategy, rather than thinking about technology enablers or hot trends in isolation.
That's great, Olaf. Like, you know, ultimately it comes down to never asking if I have my Air Miles card with me, because it's already there and it's already done, right? That kind of, as you said, back to that you talk the service design experience is that it's doing it and I don't have to think about it.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
And saving me, or actually, you know, they did this ridiculous study about NFC and payments. Is like it's 0.2 of a second longer to use NFC than it is to actually use your credit card today. So, I mean, if you're not improving it, you have to add enough to make it so that it's a seamless experience for the end user for adoption, right? And I think that's one of the key things. It's a beautiful
So
thing.
people can put up with small inconveniences.
Yep.
Or a slight delay if there's some other benefit in the experience.
Right.
But if there's no other benefit, then of course they're not going to put up with it.
Why go through it? And ultimately, it also has to make it easier for the merchant as well. So if they're going to have to go through a hassle of implementing a new technology, paying for it, installing it, doing all that stuff that they need to do, it has to benefit them as well as the consumer that they're servicing. And it has to do it in a way that is seamless and not adding extra work to their day. For no extra value. So you can see how this is a double-edged sword when it comes to implementing these technologies. You don't just do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
So my last question for you, Olaf, is I'm going to try to make it as broad as the other ones.
Okay.
You know, how should companies that are thinking about mobile, how should they get started? And I don't mean, you know, step one, call somebody, but you know, should they be looking for, you know, an isolated opportunity in what they're doing right now that they can leverage mobile? Do they go whole hog in? You know, is there, you know, a lot of people are testing the water. You know, is there one thing that you would say to them while they're testing the water? This, you know, this is how you should get started.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a great question. So I would definitely encourage experimentation. So you need to experiment and learn. You need to get this sort of small, hopefully small battle scars in order to be smarter over time. So don't spend 2 years developing a strategy and then get into the game. That's not, you're not going to be in the game then.
Yeah.
Essentially, you would have missed the boat. So you need to start to experiment quite quickly and do some trials and so on. Now, that is not the same as a strategy. It's not the same as a coherent and sustainable solution for how to move to mobile first. So, in parallel, what you need to do is to think about a few different perspectives. So, for me, there's quite a few different things that you need to think about that is actually related to your company itself. So, how can you use mobile to increase innovation overall in the company is an interesting question. Mm-hmm. How do you organize around innovation, and how do you either train existing people or find and recruit in the best people? Do you then sort of run mobile in its own business unit, or is it a best practice? Is it something that goes across your different product lines? Is it totally distributed, so it's just part of everything? Is it coupled up with your web people? Who do you work with externally, both in terms of agency or consultancy help and in terms of third-party partners to be successful in mobile? Those are organizational questions. Yep. And they are quite key as well to consider, because really what we're talking about in terms of strategy should not be only about the marketing or service experience, right, but also about the organization itself. How does it change itself to truly being at the forefront of mobile and mobile innovation? So internal change is something that's a dimension that should be considered. Then within the service strategy itself, there's two other dimensions that are really key. One is about mobile as a marketing communications channel. So that should be solved, because there is a role for mobile to play to complement your other channels, so to speak, to reach customers, to serve them well, and so on. In this always-on world, customers expect to be able to reach the companies that they pay money to or have a relationship with in numerous different ways, and that includes mobile. of course it includes mobile, and mobile is with you all the time. So there definitely is a communications and marketing aspect to mobile that should be solved and considered. In addition to that, and overlapping with it, is the product and service strategy. So how do you integrate mobile into all your product lines, all your service lines? Is it like we said, a duplication experience, or is it a complementary experience? What's the most appropriate solution? And answers to that will largely depend on what types of services and products you're offering. So that's then the third dimension. So we're talking about the organizational dimension, the marketing communications dimension, and the product and service dimension of a mobile strategy. Then the considerations that you need to have top of mind are financial, consumer trends and desires, and the technical ecosystems and the platforms that mobile is built upon.
Right.
So I think it's quite important to maybe start with your organization, your marketing communication needs, your service and product lines, and end user and end consumer expectations, needs, and trends. Those are the four sort of primary dimensions. And then what follows, what kind of is overlaid on top of that, is how do I make money on it? Right. What are the technical platforms I need to consider, and so on. So don't start with how do I make money on it, or start with how can I use NFC.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice, because most people do. They start with that, is that they look at a technology and say, okay, how can we use that? And what you're saying is that from the ground up, if you answer those questions in those areas from an organization or a sales and marketing or product side, the answer of what technology to use will be a result of all of that, right? Which is the inverse way that people are currently looking at it. Man, I got to be a part of Groupon. I got to be a part of Foursquare. Well, answer the questions first, and then it'll tell you that you shouldn't be, or you should be a part of that. It'll validate that.
Exactly. Yes.
I don't even know how. That's the best way to end a session on, which is something that's that tangible. But in case people want some more information, how can they find out about you, about Fjord? Where can I point them?
So our company is Fjord, and we provide strategic and user experience design solutions in this space. And our website is fjordnet.com.
Yeah, and
you can also follow us on Twitter or find us on Twitter, the @Fjord Twitter address.
Well, I got to tell you, there's some great things around on the website. Certainly, I was brought in by your digital nomad white paper, which is a really interesting way about the future of work and the way that we work around mobile. I think that there's a great presentation up there from the end of May, which is the dawning age of the mobile internet, which is something that was very well received. It's a beautiful presentation as well. But a number of white papers, a number of research reports that are up there at FjordNet. That's FJORDNET.com. And go and check it out. Certainly worthwhile. There's a lot of reading material up there. It could take you days to go through it all, but worthwhile. And obviously follow them on @Fjord. This has been great. I can't thank you enough, Olof, for your time. And
thank you, Rob.
Really appreciate the insight into, really understanding good versus evil mobile strategy and when to, how to build that properly up. So thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I've been speaking with Olof Schybergson, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Fjord, fjordnet.com. For those of you who are still watching or listening, really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. Olof, thank you. Viewers, listeners, guys, my untethered brethren, thank you guys for being around, and I will see you next time on untether.tv.
Thank you very much.